the center of Beijing when a man walked to the middle of the Avenue of Eternal Peace.
Well, all right. Welcome back to the Survival and Basic Badass Podcast, Kevin and Chuck. Well, today we're going to talk about some of those like secret tricks and tips that you learn from being a hiker, outdoorsman, from the Boy Scouts. Um, Turned out I went to do research for the episode, though. When I searched out secrets of the Boy Scouts, they weren't what you thought. That's not something you want to search out.
All right.
Secrets of the Boy Scouts, turns out they have some dark secrets. It'll be a lot in line with secrets of the Catholic Church. I imagine you'll get the same type of results.
Right.
That's not what we're planning to talk about, although some jokes may come into play. We'll see. All right, but there is a lot of cool things. So being a Boy Scout, I gotta say, was a big benefit in learning about survival. The Boy Scouts were founded. There was actually a guy in America who kind of like started it out, and we give credit to Baden-Powell, and he's a British guy who may have also been a little questionable on his preferences, but we won't get into that. But Baden-Powell was like an explorer, adventurer, and learned all kinds of cool tricks. And he was actually writing manuals for non-commissioned officers to like learn survival skills and things like that. So, I mean, he's a pretty awesome guy. And he actually came up with a lot of cool, ideas and things that he noted as observations. And he was in like a lot of wars and went and like he was one of these, how England was invading everybody in the late 1800s. They were just going all over trying to colonize things. He was a part of that. And, there were some bad things that come. It's kind of like like Roosevelt, where you just kind of go around and you're just a man of the world, and you go and solve problems, he's buffalo hunting and whatever, But anyway, there was a guy in America who had a couple of ruffians come and like steal stuff from his car garage or whatever. And he's like, and the parents were like, hey, we want to punish him. We don't know what to do. He's like, you know what? Why don't you give them to me for the weekend and have them come out to my farm and let me teach them about hard work and life kind of thing. And he ended up like, spending time with the kids and like showing them useful stuff and helping them out. And they were like, the kids seemed to be appreciative as well as the parents. And wow, this was a real benefit. And he ended up like starting doing these little, get togethers. And he would have people come out and do that. And he would, host like a scout camp. And when Baden-Powell decided he wanted to start a youth organization, which I got to say was kind of inspired by the Hitler Youth with Baden-Powell, because he was really impressed by them. And in no way was he like a Nazi or affiliated with that stuff. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
He was inspired by a youth program where they trained young people to grow and be outstanding. But again, it was a big thing where it wasn't about making them soldiers. It was about making them to understand the outdoors and survival. That really was his focus, Baden-Powell. So he found out about this guy in America doing it and actually flew him over. The guy had written a handbook. It had become so popular and had him come over and show him the handbook and kind of go through stuff. So there was a lot of cool stuff there that, inspired and how it got together. But the bottom line is it gets people outdoors, camping, learning how to build a fire, learning knife skills, and Boy Scouts have a lot of different merit badges where you learn, they had the basket weaving and, but it was like you learned craft skills, how to put things together. People who are pretty awesome, you have these camps where you'll go out and you'll pick the reeds and, weave them together and do cool stuff. And you learn how to make useful stuff from nothing. I think they have a pottery one and different stuff like that.
Mhm.
Um, they do have an atomic energy one that is now a nuclear safety one. We'll talk about that for a minute. Um, but you learn a lot of things. And I got to say, I learned how to handle a knife, how to sharpen a knife. I learned a lot of ways to start a fire, things like that. But you also learn a lot of cool tricks. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. So, like, if you're in a questionable spot, put in the trench around your tent if it looks like it might rain, and things like that. Um, to make the little moat so you don't wake up in soup. Now,
Right.
talking about a trench that drains, not just a moat around you to protect you. Those are the cool things. Like starting a fire, we used to take egg cartons and we would get wood chips, maybe some dryer lint, and mix it up, and we would drip wax in the like each individual egg container, like how they have
Mhm.
12 sections, and
Right.
we would drip wax and then cut them into 12 pieces, and we'd use those as a quick start, for your fire, because you could go in, drop that in there, and it's gonna light and it's gonna keep burning. And that's awesome. It just makes it easy when you're dealing with wet wood, wet stuff all around you. Um, Another great thing from the Boy Scouts, I gotta say, it never occurred to me until the Boy Scouts to bring a ground mat. Everybody always talks about, oh, I'm gonna bring a tent or a sleeping bag and just sleep in my tent and everything's great.
Right.
Well, if you fold up that little rubber mat to lay underneath it or foam mat, whatever, makes
Mhm.
a big difference.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's one of the things I noticed, going out camping as I got older. It's not worth it anymore. I always bring that mat with me.
yeah,
Always bring something to lay
a
on,
little extra.
especially cold weather. That makes a big difference staying off the cold ground.
Yeah, being insulated, it's a big thing. And they were really big wool blankets. And you could use like a second wool blanket as a, ground mat if that's, the only way you could go. Um Another thing the Boy Scouts are big on is knot tying. Um, I don't know. I feel like the starter knot, the Boy Scouts, all they ever talked about was the stupid square knot. And I can't think of one time in all usefulness that I use a square knot. Do you use a square knot in your day-to-day life?
I do every once in a while, but I
Yeah.
probably use different knots more often than the
I
square
use
knot.
a bowline knot
Mhm.
all the time. That one is like my go-to.
Yep.
That's basically like a kind of like a loop, kind of like a noose kind of thing, but it doesn't slip.
Yeah.
Like, it'll
Right.
lock firm so it doesn't close up on you.
Right,
Um,
right. It doesn't matter how tight and how much pressure you put on the rope, you can still take it
right,
apart
it'll
again.
hold its
Yeah.
shape and yeah. And the thing is, it's basically the circle, with the tree and the rabbit comes up out of the hole around the
Yeah.
tree, back in the hole.
Yep.
That's something, you can YouTube if you wanna learn it, but I feel like that's my go-to. Um, we that yeah, we'll go with that. We used to just the camaraderie, being out with guys in nature and whatever. Now, sure, that may be where the pedophilia comes. The guys want to have sleepovers and they're like, hey, I don't know, whatever.
Mhm.
But the bottom line is going out and learning other man things and bonding and sharing skills is an
Right.
awesome thing. I mean, any of you who've been in the military and kind of learn the whole warriors together, they build a tight bond.
Mhm.
And it's not the same thing going camping and going to war, although there's some similarities,
There are.
that's
There are,
that's
absolutely.
kind of a thing. Um, Another thing is, all right, so back to building a fire, right? So you have these little fire starters. My go-to would kind of be like we'd build the little teepee around the fire starter, and
Uh-huh.
then we do kind of the log cabin where it builds up out around it with the bigger, thicker wood.
Right.
And, because the teepee is like the kindling, the small sticks and twigs, and then
Mhm.
you just kind of expand on that. And then if you're doing like full on bonfire, you can just do a TP with like 4 foot long, logs.
Yeah.
But learning to build a good fire is awesome. And that
It
matters.
amazes me how many people, how many adult men don't know how to start a fire. Like a basic fire with a little bit of dried grass and stuff. Yeah, if you get 15 cardboard boxes and you know a few paper bags of paper trash and throw it in there and then
Right.
start with that. Yeah,
Couple of
that's
grocery
easy enough.
bags and
Yeah.
a can of lighter fluid.
Right, exactly.
I can get that
Exactly.
thing going. Um, well, so remember we used to make feather sticks, and
Mhm.
and that's like your straight bushcraft stuff there. But that's where you basically shave a stick into a bunch of splinters.
Mhm.
Um, the- Technically, the splinters are still stuck to the stick, like it's just fanned out.
Right,
I'm
right.
sure you guys have seen it on the internet. Fat wood, same thing, picking out the right wood, setting it aside. Um, those things, they make a big difference. Another thing with the Boy Scouts, they always seem to have like the whole ghost story, telling stories and whatever. And I feel like that's a big part of becoming a man, learning to kind of communicate and
Right.
to share stories. It's a good part of, people growing up. And I think that stuff matters.
Mhm.
Now, I did touch on they have all the different merit badges.
Right.
Now, they had an atomic energy um merit badge. And there was a scout named David Hahn. Did you hear about
Mhm.
this?
No.
If you search the internet for nuclear Boy Scout, then you might come across this. But David Hahn was pretty slick. This guy, he actually ended up becoming an Eagle Scout. But
Uh,
in the atomic energy one, he thought, well, you know what? How cool would it be if I made my own radiation? Because that only is going to end well, right?
right, that's good for you.
And in the book, it talks about how there's small amounts of radiation in smoke detectors and all these things. So, I think we actually saw this on there's that show Young Sheldon or whatever with the little kid. I
I've
think he
never
does
seen
the
that.
same thing, right?
Yeah.
It's that whatever that show is with the smart nerdy kids. I don't know. Um, so anyway, he goes around, collects all these smoke detectors and gun sights and anything else with radiation in it, because you have the glow in the dark ones, and pretty much
Right.
anything that glows in the dark, you got some kind of. So he basically fills this toolbox, and it was weird. The police got a call. He was out working on a car, but nothing's really clear. He's sitting on and the police got a call that somebody's trying to steal tires off a car.
Okay.
And they show up and they see, David Hahn sitting there, and he's like, working on the tire. And they're like, well, what's going on here? Is this your car? Oh, yeah, it's my car. Well, can you open the trunk just so like we see you have the keys and we know it's your car or whatever?
Mhm.
And he's like, oh yeah, I have the key. Hang on. And he's just like fidgety and weird and sweaty and like
I saw the
panicked.
picture of him that you just showed, and he looks fidgety and
He
weird.
looks fidgety and weird, right? So, yeah, he's like, a weird kid, but he ends up, they're like, something's funny going on. And they're like, what do you got in the toolbox? He had this metal toolbox and it was all wrapped up with duct tape.
Mhm.
And he's like, oh, don't open that. It's radioactive. And they're like, whoa, radioactive. What do you mean? And so they actually, the cops are pretty smart and they end up making a good play on this one. And they call the FBI and they call the EPA.
Mhm.
And both, and I think this is up in New York actually. And so the EPA and the FBI come out and they're like, oh, this is a lot of radiation going on here. You guys need to get out of the house. We need to, do a big thing here. Apparently, he had stockpiled so much of this stuff in his mom's garden shed that it was 100 times whatever the normal radiation level is, which, I mean, there's always a little radiation. And I
Right.
don't know if 100 times a little is that bad. We never know the real consequences it had on him because he refused to get tested because it was one of those, if I don't know, it's not real.
Right. Right.
And
Gotcha.
I also follow that policy on a lot of
Uh-huh.
things. So,
Hmm. I definitely had something that felt like it could have been COVID, but I'll never know.
I'll never know, it's whatever. So that's all right. That worked out. They did spend about $60,000 remediating his yard to get rid of the
Uh-huh.
radiation.
All right.
So there was that, that's probably not a good play. Um, you know, uh, what else?
So I can make radioactive a toolbox full of radioactive shit, and I just got to collect it out of like smoke detectors and stuff, and I'm in,
Pretty
huh?
much. Now, another thing that we've learned from the scouts is about cooking. And there is a lot of good tricks that you kind of learn in the Boy Scouts for cooking.
Hmm.
And cooking with foil is the key to everything.
Right.
So the Boy Scouts did it, the Girl Scouts did it. They really kind of master the art of cooking. And what it would be typically is a lot of times you'd take, some meat, some vegetables, peas, carrots, whatever, some potatoes, and they would just wrap it up in foil and they'd throw it in the fire
Hmm.
and you let it kind of sit in the coals. Usually it would be like 7 minutes each side, and you pull it out, you got a meal ready to go. The best thing is foil works like a plate. Foil, the cleanup afterward, you can either rinse it off and save it, or you can just throw that stuff in the garbage and you're good to go.
Hmm.
So a lot of stuff like that. People talk about like using raw, yeah, cast iron skillets
Yeah,
and
yeah,
Dutch
yeah.
ovens.
And that's
Um,
great if you don't have to carry it.
Carrying it's a bitch. One of the big things, like they'd fill up with grease and stuff like that from cooking. The Boy Scouts, we used to just take dirt and just kind of rub it in, and you could kind of get all that grease to disappear.
Hmm.
And who doesn't clean their dishes with dirt,
That's the way
right?
to go, man.
That's another secret of the pros.
Yep.
Um, what else we got?
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in there when it comes to the basics. When it comes to
So
plan
you dug
ID
into the Boy
and
Scout
animal
handbook,
ID.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the plan ID is a big, if you really get into that stuff, man, you can go a long way. I see a lot of people that go out and do the outdoor survival, and there's a lot of stuff on trapping and building a bow and arrow and that sort of stuff. But the fact of the matter is, almost every forest has enough for you to consume and get your calories in, and stay alive without having to actually trap and kill stuff. When it starts getting cold out and winter starts rolling around, well, that's fall. That's when everything's coming around and there's less animals around. But if you know what you're looking for, you can eat, and you can also get poison ivy and poison oak and eat mushrooms that kill you and all that sort of
Mhm.
stuff too. So it's not something that that you can just start going out and picking leaves and eating them and see what happens. It's not the best move.
Test it out, right?
Right. But if you know what you're
Um,
looking for, there's plenty to eat out there.
right. And that's the thing. I mean, it just kind of opens your eyes to everything. The Boy Scouts, they had the first aid merit badge, right?
Mhm.
That handbook covers all kinds of first aid procedures. I mean, that's where I first learned CPR was the Boy Scouts.
Mhm.
I was actually did the whole lifeguard thing in the Boy Scouts at the Boy Scout camp.
Mhm.
Um, when I was a kid, I used to run the archery range, and even for a short time, I ran a rifle range.
Mhm.
Um, I mostly did the archery thing, the rifle thing. The guy like got kicked out for something or another, and I took over. But
Right.
um, all I remember is Cub Scouts wanting to blow my feet off. We do the shotgun
The
and
skeet
skeet.
the skeet shooting?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we had like a 22 rifle range as well,
Uh-huh.
but we do the shotgun and the skeet. And I just remember, they'd kind of take the rifle and point it at the skeet
Right.
and follow it up. And I remember the kids like pull, and I pull it, and he just boom right at the ground, like never lifted his rifle up at all.
Right.
Just right, I'm ready. And I'm like, "Holy crap," you know? I had another, kid, shooting at me when I was doing the archery range, but these are where you learn the
Yeah,
basics, you
right.
know? Sure, you might get shot in the leg, but that's where you learn
Right,
about it,
that's the
you know?
last time it happens. Yeah, you do it once and you
Lesson
learn well.
learned. I ain't gonna stand I'm behind the kid, you know?
Yeah,
And that's I didn't know what I was doing, I was like 17 or something, running these things.
right.
Whatever, it's just you can't have all these things be that crazy. But that's where the first aid comes in. Hey, let me do a
You know what I'm saying?
tourniquet. I'm
Mhm.
ready.
Yeah,
And
couple of
that kind of
toes,
thing.
you're fine.
Whatever, right? But the same thing. A lot of kids learn how to swim. They're not exposed. I mean, I guess now in the more modern world, more people have access to a swimming pool,
Right,
be it in the city, a YMCA or public, whatever.
right.
There are things like that. But that was like the only chance kids got out of the city and got to go swim in a lake and
Mhm.
that kind of thing, canoeing, boating, all that awesome stuff. Learning those skills really help make you a kind of well-rounded, shaped person that's one able to enjoy life. Because how much do you enjoy hiking, Kevin? Right? I
Yeah,
mean, and that's
yeah.
where I learned about hiking and how to prepare food and pack it. If you go in, you start hiking on your own, there's kind of a big learning curve.
Right.
If you don't if you have friends who've all been Boy Scouts or kinda know things, you can kinda ease into it because it's basically like being with scouts anyway.
Mhm.
I mean, that's like learning it, firsthand,
Right.
but
Somebody brought enough food even if you didn't, you know?
right, and that's and about filtered water or like you mentioned, poison ivy,
Mhm.
"Oh, see that on the trail? Don't go near that. That's bad.
Right.
Danger." You know? That matters. Or you're gonna have an uncomfortable time and learn the hard way. And I guess you're kinda more resilient as a kid, so learning when you're 5 or 10 or 12 or whenever the scouts start,
Right.
I don't know. They start out with what you had to I think it's all changed now, but we had like what the Wolf Scout and Bearer and then Webelow and then into the Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
The first one, you're just kind of like reading books and doing like nonsense crafts. And then, as you move into the Boy Scouts, it gets a lot more significant, and you really learn to master the knot tying and the stuff like that. Um, but that's the different stuff. Fishing. Learning to fish in the Boy Scouts. It's another big thing. That's a real survival skill. And you also kind of learn the patience. You learn how to clean a fish, how to gut a fish. These things really matter and it makes a difference in your life, and I gotta say, only good things seem to come out of it. Now, I know we can all talk about how the Boy Scouts have taken a turn and you know what? There's girls in the Boy
Oh,
Scouts.
no.
I was pulling up pictures. There was rainbow handkerchief things
You're
happening.
sounding
And
very misogynistic, Chuck.
do I? Is that
Yeah.
what it
Yeah,
was?
I mean, they have the Girl Scouts. Can I join the Girl Scouts? Or is that just weird?
Yeah, but the answer is always yeah. But why would you want to join the Girl Scouts?
Fair enough. I mean, that's
'Cause
where all
it's
the
a
girls
less
are,
than it's
right?
a less than version.
Yeah.
And that was the problem. I mean, there should be something awesome for the girls, and I feel like, o obviously and here's the thing, here's where you go down a dangerous road, is everybody has, like, a different scoutmaster and a different troop, and they really can shape it into whatever they want it to be.
Right.
Um, I ended up connecting with one that was I was with one that was very kinda religious based and everybody, had like a Bible study, that kind of was taught by the same guys, and you'd kinda hang out and whatever. And it was really focused on being kind of a godly man kinda thing. Whereas after a couple of years, those guys I felt were very controlly and kinda lame. And I think, based on newspaper articles that came out later, I was probably right.
Mhm.
But I later hooked up with a different Boy Scout troop, and this guy was like an Indian tracker, and he just had all kinds of cool skills and, hey, learn about this. And they were just very focused on that,
Right.
So to say, oh, well, the Girl Scouts, they don't really teach everything. Well, you know what? I bet you if you had the right Girl Scout troop, they did teach you awesome
Right.
things.
Right.
And, it's just connecting with the right people.
Right.
So to put the blanket statement, and I think now, even modern day, I think if you found the right Boy Scout troop, you would find people who are really looking for awesome and looking to teach and looking to give you, what people are really after. I imagine that the novelty of girls getting in there is kind of over. And I mean, I'm sure girls are still joining the Boy Scouts. That's not my point. My point is the girls that are doing it are probably ones that really want to learn about camping and hiking
Right.
and that stuff. And if that's the case, I think that's awesome.
Hmm.
You know?
Right.
And I mean, how cool is that it can work out that, and I gotta say, you know, eh, exposure to women happened at when I worked at the Boy Scout camp and whatever. That was the thing, So to pretend like, oh, before they let girls in, it was safe from,
Right.
that boy girl. No, that's not really the case.
Hmm. Yeah.
But
No, I mean, I think that there's a big difference, and you can see that looking around just different places. I mean, people will still put that on job applications. You'll get I think you get
yes,
a rank up if you join
you
the
do.
military if you're an Eagle
Military,
Scout,
correct?
right?
Yep.
And like I said, people will put Eagle Scout on their job application. That's a real, it's real life skills that when you
I
go
mean,
that far.
not to take down college, but I mean, that's the thing. It shows that you accomplished something. You saw something through to the end.
Hmm.
You went through the pain and the obstacles that came up and you overcame them. And I got to say, for you to be an Eagle Scout, you you are a well-rounded individual. It
Hmm.
was funny, doing the research for this episode. I found I saw an interview with a girl who's like, "Oh, I went through it and, it takes all the boys 5 years and I did it in a year and a month or something."
Hmm.
And that concerned me, to be honest. I feel like you're not really developing all those skills in a year and a month because you don't get enough time.
Right.
It's not just you committing the time. You also need people who are gonna train you to commit the time.
Right.
And it's rare that one person has the ability to really show you detail on everything. That's a big thing.
Hmm. Right. Right. But I mean, if you have parents that are taking you out and excited about helping you with all those badges and taking you camping and taking you hiking and doing all that sort of stuff, you definitely can get a foot up on things. But like you said, you have to have the experience to do it, you know so I don't know. I mean, I definitely try and do that with my kids, get them outside and do stuff with them and teach them how to do things. I know my son can start his own fire and set up his own tent and do all that stuff on his own. But you know, having a structured way to go about it, like you said,
Right.
well-rounded, you know. I don't know every single thing out of the Boy Scout handbook, but I know, if I'm teaching my kid and somebody else is helping out in a group setting, that's definitely a help there,
Yeah. No, and that's, people are like, "Oh, we're, a little old for the scouts." And I got that. I just one, you can get involved in raising up the next generation of kids cuz like we just mentioned that troop leaders and that kind of thing, that's a big thing, who's out there and who's raising our kids, who are you putting in front of your kids? It's just like your kids' school teachers.
Hmm.
It
Right.
matters who you get.
Yeah,
You might get
exactly.
teachers who are awesome in shaping your kids, and you might get some teachers that are kind of questionable.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember
So,
my son had a teacher and she must have been 80 years old and just
oh,
mean as shit. She was just holding on trying to get that retirement up there, you know what I mean? She gave zero shits about actually helping children. But there's a big difference. I know I've had teachers that were, great, made me curious about stuff and want to learn on my own, and
Right.
it
And
goes
that's it.
both ways.
Right. And I think the idea exposing your kids to a lot of different things, I didn't really grow up with sports or whatever. Um, Having the right coach,
Yep.
having the right teacher. The thing is, you might have crappy teachers, but you had a great baseball coach,
Right.
who taught you a lot about life. It's time spending, and that's one of the things is a lot of the, people talk about kids growing up without fathers or different things like that. These are the places that people get exposed to that, and they get exposed to great people. But you do need to put some effort into finding out. I understand you're like, oh, Wednesday night, that works for my family. So that's the troop I'm going to pick. But you might, and maybe, you get involved. If the right troop isn't there, maybe you get involved and start helping out or, something like that.
Mhm.
Um, you can kind of shape it into something, because people who aren't committed and putting in the effort, then maybe you stepping up. So I just thought we'd put that out there. I mean, because there are a lot of cool things. Um, a lot of cool takeaways, I guess, is what I was getting at that you can learn from the scouts. And, hopefully some of these things like a gypsy well, right? I mean, that's where I first kind of learned about that.
Right.
There's all these different, how to tap a tree for water.
Mhm.
Um, these are things that, are good takeaways and worth looking up and spending some time and looking into. So I don't know. That's what I got. Kevin, what do you got going on in the world? Everything good?
Everything's good, man. Everything's good. Staying busy.
I was excited to learn this week. I was perusing the internet, and it turns out that there is there's 300 blackout ammo. Um they 300 blackout is like a 5.56 round cut shorter cuz the shell um basically throats down to fit a smaller bullet,
Mhm.
and they cut it so that you can fit a fatter bullet in there, and it goes from, the 223 to 300.
Mhm.
Well, it turns out there's 8.6 blackout that I had no idea.
Mhm.
And this thing is quiet and it's powerful. Um, so 8.6 blackout is basically a 6.5 Creedmoor shell cut down so you can fit a 338, which is huge round in there. And it's basically effective up to 400 yards,
Mhm.
114 dB. So quiet. So you're quiet, and basically you could shoot a cow in the front and it's coming out the back.
Ooh.
I mean, that's the kind of round you're looking at. So I'm just saying there's cool things out there. I know it was a little off topic.
Uh-huh.
I had to give you guys a little something because I was excited.
Mhm.
And I'm just saying it might be something you want to look into. Um, I'm saying you can go on Gunbroker and get an upper for it, and it goes on the AR-10 platform.
Mhm.
You could be in it for about $1,400.
Right.
I'm just saying, change your name to Kicking Ass. I
Mhm.
would, right? Um, anyway, that's the excitement I got. If you guys enjoyed it, appreciate it. Want to check out, support us on Patreon. There's patreon.com/prepping badass. We have some cool items that you get if you sign up for that. You got t-shirts, coffee mugs, things like that. Maybe you don't want to commit to a monthly thing, and maybe you just want a badass t-shirt or a coffee mug. Go to preppingbadass.com, click the store. Check it out there. You have show topics, ideas, concerns, questions. You can email us at preppingbadass@gmail.com. Otherwise, I would say stay safe, and we will talk to you guys next week.